Have you ever felt like something changed, but you couldn't explain it? Not a big argument, not a dramatic confession, just a strange feeling. A shift in energy, a look that disappeared too fast, a silence that suddenly felt loud. And the scary part? Sometimes guilt doesn't speak with words. It leaks out through behavior. Today we're breaking down 8 hidden signs a wife may show when she's carrying guilt after betrayal. Sign these. May here are sirs. Signs most men completely overlook. And trust me, number 7 catches almost everyone off guard. Relationships rarely collapse overnight. Most of the time, the emotional distance starts quietly. Small habits change. Conversations feel different. Certain reactions stop making sense. Now, let's be clear. None of these signs automatically prove cheating. Human behavior is complicated. Stress, anxiety, and emotional struggles can create similar patterns. But psychology teaches us something important. When people carry guilt, their mind tries to protect them. And sometimes their behavior exposes what their words try to hide. So if you've been noticing unusual shifts in your relationship, this video may help you understand what's really happening beneath the surface. Let's begin. Sign number 1, she suddenly over-explains everything. Have you noticed how some people talk more when they're nervous? Not because they want to communicate, because they want control. A guilty mind often fears simple questions. Where were you? How was your day? Why are you late? Instead of giving calm, natural answers, they start adding extra details nobody asked for. Traffic was insane, then my friend called, then I stopped for coffee because the office was stressful. Too much information can sometimes be a psychological defense mechanism. Why? Because guilty people often believe details make them sound believable. Ironically, the opposite can happen. When someone rehearses normal conversations too carefully, their responses can start feeling unnatural. And here's the part many men miss. It's not the words themselves. It's the tension underneath them, almost like they're trying to convince themselves while convincing you. Sign number 2, she becomes unusually defensive. Here's something fascinating about guilt. It often creates emotional sensitivity. Questions that once felt harmless suddenly trigger irritation. You ask something simple. She reacts like it's an accusation. Why are you checking up on me? You don't trust me? You're overthinking everything. Now, healthy people can become defensive too. That's normal. But guilt changes the intensity. Psychologists call this projection defense. Sometimes a person carrying guilt assumes others are suspicious, even before suspicion exists. And because they already feel internally conflicted, even neutral conversations start feeling threatening. Imagine carrying a secret all day. Eventually, even ordinary moments feel dangerous. That pressure leaks out emotionally. But the next sign is where things become really subtle, because it doesn't look negative at all. In fact, many men mistake it for love. Sign number 3, she starts acting too perfect. This one confuses a lot of people. After guilt enters a relationship, some individuals suddenly become extra attentive. Unexpected compliments, random gifts, more affection than usual, sudden efforts to avoid conflict. At first it feels amazing, but psychologically, guilt often pushes people into compensation behavior. The mind tries to balance emotional discomfort by making up for something internally. It's almost subconscious. A person may try harder in the relationship not because they feel closer, but because they feel guilty. Think about it. Why do humans apologize after hurting someone? Because guilt creates a need for emotional relief. And sometimes that relief appears as unusual kindness. Again, context matters. A loving partner being affectionate is healthy. But when affection suddenly feels forced, timed, or emotionally inconsistent, it can raise questions, especially if it arrives alongside emotional distance in other areas. Sign number 4, her phone becomes a high security zone. Let's be honest. Phones hold modern emotional lives, conversations, secrets, attention, validation. That's why behavioral changes around devices can become noticeable. Maybe she used to leave her phone around casually. Now it never leaves her side. Maybe notifications suddenly disappear instantly. Passwords change unexpectedly. Screen angles shift when you walk near. None of this proves betrayal by itself. Privacy matters, but sudden behavioral shifts matter too, because guilty behavior often creates hyper-awareness. The person becomes more protective, not necessarily because they're hiding evidence every second, but because their anxiety increases. And anxiety changes habits. A guilty mind constantly scans for risk. Even normal situations start feeling dangerous. That's why secrecy often grows quietly before anyone notices emotionally. Imagine this. A husband walks into the kitchen late at night. His wife quickly flips her phone over. He says nothing, but his brain notices, not because of paranoia, because humans are naturally wired to detect behavioral inconsistencies. And once patterns change repeatedly, the emotional atmosphere changes too. Sign number 5, she avoids eye contact during certain conversations. This sign is subtle, very subtle, because eye contact alone doesn't reveal lies. But emotional discomfort often changes visual behavior. Watch carefully during emotionally sensitive topics. Does she suddenly look away more often? Change the subject quickly? Become restless? Here's why this happens psychologically. The eyes are deeply connected to emotional regulation. When someone feels shame, guilt, or internal conflict, maintaining natural eye contact can become harder during specific discussions, especially when the conversation touches emotionally dangerous territory. And notice this. The discomfort is usually selective. Normal conversations feel fine, but certain topics create visible tension. That contrast matters, because behavior patterns tell stories words sometimes hide. Quick question. Have you ever ignored a red flag because you wanted peace more than truth? Most people have. And honestly, that's human. Nobody wants to believe someone they love could hide something painful. But staying emotionally aware is important. Not to become paranoid. Not to accuse without evidence, but to protect your emotional well-being. And the next signs become even more psychologically intense, especially number 6, because it changes the emotional chemistry of the entire relationship. Sign number 6, she starts emotionally distancing herself. One of the biggest effects of unresolved guilt is emotional withdrawal. Why? Because closeness increases discomfort. Think about it. The more emotionally connected someone feels to their partner, the harder guilt becomes to carry. So sometimes the mind unconsciously creates distance as self-protection. Less deep conversation, less emotional vulnerability, less genuine connection. You may still live together, still talk daily, still function normally, but something feels missing. The emotional warmth fades, and many men describe it the same way. It feels like she's physically here, but mentally somewhere else. That sentence matters, because emotional distance rarely appears randomly. There's usually an internal reason behind it. Stress, depression, burnout, emotional conflict, or sometimes hidden guilt. Sign number 7, she randomly accuses you of things. This sign surprises almost everyone. Sometimes guilt reverses direction. Instead of hiding quietly, the guilty person becomes suspicious of you. Suddenly, she questions your loyalty, your honesty, your intentions, even without clear reasons. Why does this happen? Projection. One of psychology's most powerful defense mechanisms. People sometimes project their own internal behavior onto others because it temporarily reduces psychological discomfort. In simple terms, their mind says, if I'm capable of this, maybe they are too. And here's the dangerous part. The accusations create confusion. Now you become defensive. You start explaining yourself. You stop asking questions. The focus shifts away from her behavior completely. That emotional reversal happens more often than people realize. And many relationships get trapped in that cycle for months, sometimes years. Sign number 8, her stories start changing in small ways. Not huge lies, small inconsistencies, tiny details that don't line up. A timeline changes slightly. A conversation gets remembered differently. An event suddenly has new information attached to it. Individually, these moments seem harmless, but repeated inconsistencies can create psychological friction because maintaining false narratives requires mental effort. And humans are imperfect storytellers under pressure, especially over time. Now, here's something important. Memory mistakes happen naturally. Everybody forgets details sometimes, but guilt-driven inconsistencies often carry a different emotional tone. There's hesitation, correction, nervous energy, almost like the brain is editing while speaking. And when enough small contradictions appear together, trust starts weakening quietly. Here's the hardest truth about all of this. Sometimes people don't confess because they fear losing the relationship. Sometimes they hide guilt because they can't face the damage themselves. And sometimes the partner sensing the changes starts doubting their own instincts. That's what emotional confusion does. It creates internal conflict. You're overthinking. Maybe it's stress. Maybe nothing's wrong. But intuition often notices patterns before logic catches up. Not magic. Not mind reading. Patterns, tone changes, behavior shifts. Emotional inconsistency. The human brain is designed to detect changes in emotional safety. That's why certain relationships suddenly feel off, even when nothing obvious happened yet. And if you're experiencing that feeling right now, remember this. Don't rush into accusations. Observe calmly. Communicate honestly. Pay attention to consistency over time. Because mature relationships are built on clarity, not fear, guessing, or emotional games. At the end of the day, guilt leaves traces, not always dramatic ones, sometimes quiet ones. A defensive reaction, an emotional withdrawal, a strange inconsistency, a sudden shift in behavior. But real strength comes from how you respond. Not with anger, not with revenge, not with paranoia, but with emotional awareness and self-respect. Because the truth always reveals itself eventually. And the strongest people are the ones who stay calm long enough to see it clearly. If this video made you think differently about human behavior, subscribe for more psychology-based relationship insights. And comment below, which sign do you think most people ignore? Also, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes understanding psychology can protect people from emotional damage before it's too late.